Grant Kincaid rode through the heart of Christmas morning like a man trying to outpace his own shadow. The Wyoming landscape was a vast, frozen canvas of white, the deep snow unbroken save for the dark, churning trench carved by his horse's hooves. Winter had clamped its jaws tight around the territory, frost-coated every fence rail like jagged diamonds, and the air was so bitter it seemed to crystallize in his lungs. Every exhale he released was a fleeting cloud, vanishing into the grey sky just as quickly as his faith had for years ago. He had a plan, rigid and cold as the day itself: reach the settlement of Bitter Creek by nightfall, secure a solitary room, and drown the memories of the season in a bottle of cheap whiskey. It was a ritual he had perfected. For the last 4 years, Grant had spent Christmas moving. Standing still meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering the fire, the fever, and the silence that followed. But the road had other plans. Through the veil of falling snow, he saw them. 2 small figures stood motionless at a weathered split-rail fence. They were tiny, perhaps 7 years old, bundled in matching wool coats that had been patched with meticulous care so many times the original fabric was barely visible. They didn't wave. They didn't shout for help. They simply gripped the frost-slicked rails, watching his approach with an intensity that unsettled him. As Grant drew closer, the details of their faces sharpened. They were identical, with jet-black hair cut in straight bangs across their foreheads and almond-shaped eyes dark as obsidian. They were Chinese, a rare sight in this remote corner of the territory, and they watched him with a desperate, silent certainty. Grant meant to ride past. His heels were already tensing to urge his roan stallion forward, to keep the wall around his heart intact. But as he came abreast of the gate, the girls spoke in perfect unison, their voices piercing the hushed winter air like silver bells. "Please, mister. Be our daddy today." The request hit him harder than the wind. His horse stopped, though Grant hadn't pulled the reins. The animal seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, halting in the knee-deep snow. "We asked the spirits for a Christmas wish," one girl said, her breath pluming in the cold. "Then you came riding up." Grant stared down at them. Their noses were red from the biting frost, but their eyes held a terrifying amount of hope. It was the kind of hope that could crush a man if he wasn't careful. Behind them, a modest cabin sat nestled against the tree line. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, suggesting warmth and life, yet these two had chosen to stand in the freezing cold, waiting. "Just for today," the other twin added, her voice trembling slightly. "That's all we ask." Every survival instinct Grant possessed screamed at him to run. Ride on. Don't look back. Do not let those dark, pleading eyes burrow into the hollow cavity where his heart used to beat. He knew the pain of loving a child, and he knew the devastation of losing one. He couldn't do this. But his hands refused to lift the reins. His heels wouldn't kick. He sat frozen, trapped by the gaze of 2 children who looked at him as if he were a divine intervention. The cabin door flew open with a bang that echoed off the trees. A woman rushed out, a shawl clutched tightly around her shoulders. She was slight of build, her dark hair pulling loose from its pins, her face etched with a mixture of panic and exhaustion. She was beautiful, even in her distress, with high cheekbones and eyes that held a fierce, protective light. "Jade! Pearl! Get inside this instant!" She reached the fence in seconds, her hands gripping the girl's shoulders, pulling them back. Her cheeks flushed a deep crimson, not just from the wind, but from profound embarrassment. She looked up at Grant, her eyes widening as she took in his size and the gun on his hip. "I am so sorry, sir," she said, her accent holding the soft lilt of her heritage mixed with the rough edges of the frontier. "They do not understand. Please forgive them." But Mama, one twin, Jade, perhaps, protested. "You said we could ask the ancestors. You said we could ask for help." "That is not what I meant," the woman said, her voice cracking. She glanced at Grant, her mortification deepening. "My husband. Their father. He passed 2 winters ago. Every Christmas morning, they pray for him to return. They do not mean to bother strangers." The sentence hung in the frozen air, heavy and sharp. The other twin, Pearl, tugged on her mother's skirt. Mama, he heard us. And he stopped. Nobody else stops. The woman closed her eyes for a heartbeat, composing herself. When she opened them, a steel spine of dignity had replaced the shame. I am Mai Lin, she said. I apologize for my daughter's forwardness. They meant no harm. No harm taken, Grant said. His voice sounded rusty, like a gate hinge that hadn't been used in years. He realized he hadn't spoken to a soul in days. Mai straightened her posture, looking at the snow piling up on his shoulders. Please, she said, the code of the West warring with her caution. Let me offer you breakfast as an apology. You look frozen through. It is Christmas morning. I cannot let a traveler ride on without something warm in his belly. Grant knew he should refuse. The word no was forming on his tongue, ready to launch him back into the safety of his solitude. Please, Mr. Cowboy, Jade whispered, clutching the fence rail again. Just breakfast, Grant heard himself say, the words bypassing his brain entirely. Much obliged. He dismounted, his legs stiff from the cold and the miles. As he tied his stallion to the fence post, he heard Pearl whisper to her sister, See, Jade? He stayed. The words pierced him. He almost untied the horse right then. Almost swung back up and galloped toward the grey horizon until the beast collapsed. But Mai was already herding the girls toward the warmth of the cabin, and the door stood open, spilling golden firelight onto the blue-white snow. Grant took a breath that burned his lungs and followed. The cabin was small, immaculate, and smelled of pine and cooked dough. A fire crackled cheerfully in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the scrubbed wooden floors. The table was set for 3, but Mai quickly retrieved a 4th plate from a cupboard. Everything in the room showed signs of careful mending, the curtains, the chair cushions, the quilts visible through the open door of the bedroom. It was a home of poverty, but also of immense pride. Sit, please, Mai gestured to the head of the table. Girls, wash your hands. Grant removed his hat, his fingers fumbling with the brim. He sat where she indicated and immediately felt the oppressive weight of the empty chair. Ghosts filled that space. He pushed the memories down, locking them away in the dark cellar of his mind. The twins returned, sliding into their seats with identical grace. They stared at him with unabashed curiosity, their dark eyes tracking his every move. Do you have children, Mr. Cowboy? Jade asked before her mother could stop her. Jade! Mai's voice held a warning note. It's all right, Grant said, though his throat tightened as if a noose were closing around it. I did once. A boy. And a wife. Where are they? Pearl asked softly. Fever took them both. For years back. The cabin fell silent, save for the popping of the firewood. Pearl reached across the table, her small hand covering Grant's weather-beaten knuckles. Her skin was warm, a shocking contrast to the ice in his veins. I am sorry your family went to the sky, she said. Ours went too. Papa makes good company for them, I bet. He tells good stories. Grant's chest constricted so hard he couldn't breathe. He nodded, unable to speak. Mai served breakfast, eggs, warm biscuits, and a few strips of precious bacon that had likely been saved for weeks for this specific meal. It was simple food, but it tasted of effort and care. She didn't pry into his loss, offering him only the quiet respect of a hot meal and a refilled coffee cup. The girls ate quickly, then excused themselves to a corner of the room. They returned a moment later carrying 2 small, intricately carved wooden horses. Papa made these, Jade said proudly, holding hers up. Before the mine took him. See? He carved every hair. Grant took the wooden figure, his large, calloused hands cradling it gently. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. The horse looked alive, caught in mid-gallop, its head tossed back in wild defiance. It was the work of a master. Your papa was skilled, Grant said, his voice low. This is fine work. Better than fine. Both girls beamed, absorbing the praise like sunflowers turning toward the light. Mr. Cowboy, Pearl said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Will you stay for Christmas dinner, too? Mama is making venison stew. It is our special meal. Mai started to intervene. Girls, mister. I didn't catch your name. Grant, he said. Grant Kincaid. Mr. Kincaid surely has places to be, girls. He cannot spend his whole day here. Just dinner, Grant said. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. Just today. If you don't mind. Mai's eyes widened slightly, softening at the corners. We would be honored, Mr. Kincaid. Outside, the snow began to fall in earnest, fat flakes drifting past the window like white feathers, burying the world in silence. Grant watched them fall and realized with a start what he had agreed to. A whole day. A whole day with a family that wasn't his, in a home that threatened to crack open every sealed wound inside him. By mid-morning, restlessness drove him outside. His hands needed work, his mind needed occupation. Idleness was the enemy. Idleness led to thinking. The homestead offered plenty of distraction. The woodpile was dangerously low for a Wyoming winter. The fence had gaps where the rails had rotted or been kicked loose. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges, letting in icy drafts that would sicken the livestock. Grant found a splitting axe in the barn and set to work on the wood. The rhythm soothed him. Lift. Swing. Crack. Each split log was a thought silenced. He had been working for 20 minutes when Jade appeared, bundled in her coat. What are you doing, Mr. Grant? Building up your woodpile. Winter's got teeth this year. Can I help? Papa used to let me stack. You can stack what I split, Grant nodded. She set to work with enthusiasm, her small arms struggling with logs half her size. Pearl emerged soon after, watching from the porch, and then Mai appeared with a bucket of water. You do not have to do this, she said, watching him wipe sweat from his brow despite the freezing temperature. Can't sit idle, Grant said, swinging the axe. Besides, you need the wood. That pile wouldn't last a week. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I will help with the fence, then. I have been meaning to fix it before the deep freeze sets in. They worked in companionable silence, Mai proving herself capable and strong. She wasn't performing helplessness, she was a partner in the labor. Grant respected that. By afternoon, he had restocked the woodpile, repaired 3 sections of the fence, and rehung the barn door so it swung true and latched tight. His muscles ached pleasantly. His mind was quiet. Mr. Grant. Mr. Grant. Jade ran toward him across the snowy yard, Pearl following more slowly. We made you something. They thrust a piece of coarse paper at him. Grant wiped his hands on his trousers and looked down. It was a drawing done in charcoal. 3 stick figures stood in front of a cabin. Below them, in careful, jagged lettering, me, Pearl, and Mr. Cowboy Daddy. His throat closed completely. Do you like it? Jade bounced on her heels. Pearl drew it. She is the artist. I did the letters. Grant stared at the drawing. He should give it back. He should explain that he wasn't their daddy, that he wasn't anybody's anything anymore. He couldn't be what they needed. But his fingers curled around the paper's edges protectively. It's real fine, he managed to choke out. Best gift I've had in years. The girls glowed. Mai called from the porch. Dinner will be ready soon. Come wash up. As they ran toward the cabin, Jade called over her shoulder, Papa always said every tool has a purpose. You are our Christmas tool, Mr. Grant. Grant stood in the falling snow, clutching a child's drawing, his chest aching with an emotion he had thought buried under 6 feet of earth. Christmas dinner was a sacred affair. Mai had laid out a tablecloth of white linen, likely brought from China years ago. Candles flickered in tin holders, casting a soft, golden glow. The venison stew steamed in the center, rich and hearty. The twins insisted Grant sit at the head of the table again. That is where Papa sat, Pearl explained matter-of-factly. Grant Saturday. The chair felt enormous. My served the stew with quiet dignity. Mr. Grant, Pearl said softly. Will you say grace? Papa always said grace. For years since he had spoken to God. For years of silence, anger, and a grief so deep it had no bottom. But those brown eyes waited, trusting. Grant bowed his head. The girls followed instantly. Mai lowered her gaze. Lord, Grant began, his voice rough as gravel. Thank you for this food. For the hands that prepared it. For he swallowed hard. For shelter from the storm. And for the grace of second chances. Amen. Amen, the girls chorused. Dinner passed with gentle conversation. The girls chatted about the horses, their favorite games, and stories of their father. Grant listened more than he talked, but his silence felt comfortable, a warm blanket rather than a cold wall. After a dessert of dried apple pie, the twins grew drowsy. They curled up on a rug by the fire, their wooden horses clutched in their hands, and within minutes, they were asleep. Mai covered them with a quilt and settled into the chair opposite Grant. The firelight painted her features in warm bronze. I should explain, she said quietly. About their father. Grant waited. Chen was a good man. Strong. Hard-working. He came here for the railroad, then saved enough to buy this land. He wanted a legacy for his daughters, her voice steadied. He died in the mine. The foreman, a man named Webb, pushed the work too hard. Ignored safety. Chen warned him about the supports. He died for that warning. Her hands twisted in her lap. I sought justice. Compensation. But Webb. He has connections. The town council, the businessman. They closed ranks. They called me a troublemaker. They said a Chinese woman should be grateful just to be allowed to stay. They said Chen knew the risks. Grant's fists clenched under the table. They shunned you. Completely. They will not buy my eggs. They will not let the girls play with the other children. We manage. But she looked at her sleeping daughters. Truth has a way of coming out. Like smoke through cracks. You cannot keep it sealed forever. Grant's moral compass, dormant for 4 years, stirred with an old, righteous anger. You did right, he said firmly. Seeking justice ain't troublemaking. It's necessary. Mai's eyes met his, surprise and gratitude mingling there. Thank you for saying that. Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for today. You have given them the best Christmas since Chen died. Grant looked at the sleeping girls. He should leave at dawn. But his heart whispered otherwise. The trouble arrived the next morning, wearing a smile that didn't reach its eyes. Grant had slept in the barn, insisting on propriety. He woke to the sound of crunching snow and the jingle of a bridle. He stepped out into the blinding white of the morning sun just as a rider approached the cabin. The man was in his 50s, heavyset and well-dressed in a thick buffalo coat. He sat his horse with the arrogance of a man who owned everything he could see. Mai emerged from the cabin, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face went carefully neutral. Mr. Webb. Good morning. Thaddeus Webb dismounted. Just checking on you folks, Mai. Making sure the widow and her girls survived the storm. His eyes swept over Grant, the repaired fence, the full woodpile. Calculations flickered behind his friendly expression. We are fine, thank you, Mai said, her voice holding a razor's edge. Webb's attention fixed on Grant. And who might this be? I didn't know you were taking in boarders. A traveler, Mai said quickly. He took shelter from the snow. I see a Webb smile sharpened into a sneer. Shelter. Of course he stepped closer to Mai, dropping his voice to a tone of false concern that carried clearly in the cold air. Mrs. Lin, I would hate to see talk start again. You know how the town worries about the girls' welfare. Strange men staying overnight. A woman of your background. Needs to be careful. The threat hung in the air like poison smoke. Grant stepped forward, his boots crunching loudly on the ice. Mr. Tanner is a gentleman, Mai said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. I'm sure Webb waved a dismissive hand. I am just concerned. Those girls need stability. Propriety. I would hate for the council to question your fitness as a mother. It would be a shame if they had to be placed elsewhere. Grant's hand hovered near his hip. He wanted to strike the man. But he knew that violence would only validate Webb's narrative. Webb mounted his horse, tipping his hat with exaggerated courtesy. Good day, Mrs. Lynn. Consider what I've said. The town has a long memory. He rode off, leaving a silence that felt heavier than the snow. I should go, Grant said quietly. Mai turned to him, resignation replacing her anger. Yes. You should. Before he spreads more poison. I cannot afford more trouble. Grant nodded. He saddled his horse in silence. The twins watched from the porch, confusion clouding their faces. He had brought this on them. His presence was a weapon Webb could use. I'm sorry, Grant said. Don't be, Mai said. You gave us a Christmas. Grant mounted his horse and rode out. He didn't look back. He rode for a mile, the rhythmic crunch of hooves the only sound. He was running again. Running from caring. Running from the pain of connection. But 50 yards past the bend in the road, Grant stopped. His horse halted, pouring the snow. Behind him, the cabin was out of sight, but he could still see it in his mind. The smoke rising. The fence he'd mended. And on the porch, 2 little girls who had asked him to be their father for a day. He remembered Jade's voice, you promised daddies don't leave. He hadn't promised. But to them, his staying had been a promise. Grant sat on his horse in the middle of the frozen road. A man can ride 1,000 miles to escape his heart, but it rides right alongside him. He was running from the very thing that could save him. Those girls deserved better than a coward. That woman deserved someone to stand beside her against men like Webb. Grant turned his horse around. When he rode back into the yard, Jade and Pearl were still on the porch, crying. Mai was staring at the ground, defeated. At the sound of hoofbeats, they looked up. The transformation on the girls' faces, from despair to radiant disbelief, broke Grant Kincaid apart and put him back together in a new shape. Thought you were leaving, Mai said, her voice trembling. Changed my mind, Grant dismounted. You said there's a Christmas service in town this morning. We usually do not go. People talk. Let them talk. Grant's jaw set like granite. Your girls deserve to worship with their community. And anyone who says otherwise can say it to me. Mr. Kincaid. Grant. Just Grant. He looked at the twins, who were running through the snow toward him. Some things are worth standing for, Mai. Some people, too. Jade launched herself at his legs. You came back. I did. Grant knelt in the snow. I'm not going anywhere just yet. I reckon I could use a purpose. He stood and offered his hand to Mai. After a long moment, she took it. Her grip was strong. Then let's give them something to talk about, she said. The church at Bitter Creek was a simple white structure, its steeple reaching for the winter sky. Wagons crowded the yard. Smoke rose from the chimney. Grant drove the wagon, Mai sitting tall beside him, the twins bundled in the back. As they pulled up, heads turned. Whispers hissed like steam. Grant helped Mai down, then swung the twins to the ground. He offered Mai his arm. She took it, lifting her chin. Together, they walked up the steps. The sanctuary was full. As they entered, the hum of conversation died abruptly. Every eye fixed on them. In the front pew, Thaddeus Webb sat with his family. When he saw Grant and Mai, his face flushed with shock and then fury. The Reverend, a grey-haired man named Thomas, paused his greeting. Grant guided Mai and the girls to an empty pew in the center. They sat, the girls sandwiched protectively between the adults. The service began. Hymns were sung. Scripture was read. The tension in the room was palpable, a taut wire ready to snap. During the prayer requests, Webb stood up. "Reverend," he boomed, smoothing his coat. "If I might have a moment." Reverend Thomas looked uneasy. "Of course, Mr. Webb." Webb turned to face the congregation. "Friends, as a council member, I feel duty-bound to address the moral standing of our community. We all know the widow Lynn has struggled, and we have been patient. But now, she brings a drifter into our midst, flaunting propriety." Grant stood. The sound of his boots on the floorboards was like a gunshot. Webb stopped, his mouth hanging open. Grant stepped into the aisle. He didn't look angry, he looked immovable. "My name is Grant Kincaid," he said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. "I was passing through yesterday. 2 little girls asked me to stay for Christmas. Their mother fed a stranger on a holy day when she had barely enough for herself." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the townsfolk. "That is charity," Grant said. "That is Christian virtue. This woman has raised her daughters with dignity despite losing her husband to a mind that didn't care if he lived or died. She has asked for nothing but fairness. Now see here." Webb sputtered. "You are a stranger." "I am," Grant said. "But I have eyes. Anyone who thinks this woman or these children are lesser because of where they come from or who they are, well, you can say it to my face. And we will see who is truly lacking in virtue." Silence stretched tight. Then, from the back, an elderly woman stood up. It was Mrs. Gable, the town seamstress. "I remember when Chen fixed my roof after the hailstorm," she said, her voice wavering but clear. "He wouldn't take a penny. Said neighbors help neighbors." Another man stood. A farmer.